We are go for launch. T-minus
15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
From the exorcism of Roland Doe in late 1940s Washington, D.C., to the 1975 Amityville haunting on Long Island, the nation's history is riddled with tales of haunted houses and evil spirits. But perhaps the most terrifying ghost story of them all comes from the frontier days of Oakland, California. The tale begins on April 24, 1874, in the home of government worker Thomas Clarke.
Mr. Clarke worked for the U.S. Treasury Department in San Francisco. And he had a wife, and he had 2 children, his daughter, Nellie, and his 8-year-old son, Harry.
Around midnight, Clarke is awoken by an alarming sound. The incessant jangling of the front doorbell.
Who could be at the door at that time of the night? It was so late, and he wasn't expecting anybody to come.
Wary of bandits, Clarke grabs his gun and heads downstairs. But when he opens the door, no one is there.
He can't find anybody or anything. He was puzzled.
Suddenly, Clarke hears a tremendous crash coming from the living room. He rushes in to find a large heater lying on its side.
The heater was likely about 40 or 50 pounds. Mr. Clarke knew there was no way that that heater could have fallen there of itself.
By now, the rest of the family has been roused by the disturbance and is making their way down the stairs. Just as daughter Nellie descends to the bottom landing, a basket filled with silverware flies through the air and nearly strikes her in the head.
This was very, very dangerous. This must have terrified Nellie. How could that have happened? Who did this?
As the family huddles together in fear, the furniture around them suddenly takes flight.
All of a sudden, a huge trunk, 80 pounds in weight, came flying down the stairs. Chairs move around without anybody touching them.
Then an eerie shriek splits the night, and the entire house is illuminated by a mysterious light.
Light, seemingly from nowhere, began to shine inside the house. The family cannot explain this, and they're terrified.
But it's only the beginning of their troubles. For the next 3 nights, the Clarkes continue to be plagued by similar strange events. Then, just as swiftly as they began, the horrific happenings stop. The family is left with one burning question. Is their house haunted by a malevolent spirit? Convinced that a poltergeist is stalking his family, Clarke turns to a spiritualist for help. The medium holds a seance to communicate with the ghost. It's then that the supposed ghost whisperer makes a startling claim.
She's sure that someone had been murdered in the house.
Determined to find out more, Clarke teams up with one of the most prominent academics of the day, Dr. Joseph LeConte.
Dr. LeConte was a world-famous professor. He was the first president of the University of California.
Hoping to turn up some evidence of foul play, LeConte digs through local archives. But he comes up empty.
There had never been a murder in the house.
Next, the 2 men wonder if the home could have been built on top of an ancient burial ground. But that's also dismissed.
There are no records that show there was ever a cemetery at that site.
So what could explain the spooky events witnessed by Clarke and his family? Without any supporting evidence, LeConte eventually comes to a less spirited conclusion. The Clarke family may have been the victims of a well-orchestrated prank.
He decided it had to have been someone in that house that night, one of the members of the family.
But Clarke is convinced this was no man-made stunt.
This conclusion didn't make sense. They knew it couldn't have been anyone living at the house that could have done this because they had all huddled together and none of them had left.
In 1877, Clarke publishes a book detailing the chilling account. Terrified the specter may return, the family moves out of the house. The structure remains abandoned until it's torn down in the 1970s. But to this day, local residents still report odd occurrences at the site.
People in that very neighborhood claim that that spirit still exists.